Hi, and welcome to the Badass Breastfeeding Podcast, co-hosted by Abby Thiering, the Badass Breastfeeder, and Dianne Cassidy, IBCLC. My name's Abby Thiering. I write a blog called the Badass Breastfeeder, and I was a social worker for 14 years before I became a mom, and struggled a lot with breastfeeding, became very empowered through breastfeeding, and turned my social work advocacy into a blog and a breastfeeding community.
And I'm Dianne Cassidy. I'm an IBCLC, which is a lactation consultant, advocate as well. And I got into breastfeeding because of my children, the path I took with my kids, kind of like Abby, struggled and questioned and rallied for support and ended up kind of falling into this life of being a breastfeeding advocate. And we want to welcome you to the Badass Breastfeeding Podcast. This is episode 2. And in addition, Dianne and Abby are very busy moms who love to take time to advocate. And we also are doing lots of mom things. So you might hear in the background some noise, some dogs barking, some kids screaming, playing, crying, doorbells ringing, phones ringing, anything like that happening. And it's just life happening around us. So just let it happen. All right. So welcome to episode 2 of the Badass Breastfeeding Podcast. Last episode, if you missed it, definitely go back and hit it up because you don't want to miss hearing all about how we came into the world of breastfeeding. But this week, we are going to talk a little bit about conflicting information and how that impacts breastfeeding and how that impacts a new mom. I see it a lot in the work that I do with new families. It's something that comes up all the time. Now, Abby, do you see that in the blogs too?
Oh my God, all the time. I experienced it myself, and I still see it all the time.
So do you have one that stands out, something that someone told you that you were like, no, but I heard this something different from somebody else, and they're telling me this, or an example of where that really stood out to you?
You know, it's incredible because I feel like it stands out. There's like so many, it stands out. It starts in just like pregnancy.
Oh my God,
there's all of this stuff. Like you get pregnant and, people are like, well, you can, get the baby to come out faster if you eat pineapples and walk up and down the stairs. And then like if you, so lay down on your back and push really hard. And like, the doctors are telling people this. And, you go on Google and you want to like Google things. And Google is filled with all kinds of terrible, terrible information. It's awful. And people are like, what? And, so I think it starts, there's a lot of terrible information, I think, specifically surrounding birth and how birthing happens. And in our culture, birthing has become a business. So we tend to think that like we can't, there's so much doubt about our body's ability to just birth this baby. And then this doubt comes, on, I think, even stronger when we start breastfeeding. There's like all this doubt, like I can't do this. And that's just basic misinformation there to begin with. That my body is not capable of birthing and breastfeeding this baby. Like that's just like cultural misinformation. Mm-hmm. It's like a norm. It's a norm that we think. And I remember the thing that stands out that I think is funny now, because I don't see a lot of people talking about this, but I remember there's a lot of this, like people are like, what can I do to prepare to breastfeed? What do I need to do to prepare? And it's like, girl, you have boobs. You were born to breastfeed. Like there's nothing you do. But I'm sure you've heard this where people are like, take a shower and then rub a towel on your nipples and harden them up.
Yes.
Which is like, oh my God, the worst possible thing you could possibly do to your body.
And some people will still ask me that, like when I do prenatal breastfeeding classes, and they're like, well, my mom told me I should prepare. And I always look at them like with the most serious face, and I say, I'm not quite sure what that even means. Like to prepare your nipples. I actually did have, I'll never forget, when I was working inpatient at one of our popular hospitals here, and I had a mom in the bed after she had had the baby, And I asked her how everything was going, whatever we were talking about, how the first few breastfeeds were. And she goes, well, I was prepared because I hardened my nipples up with a washcloth first. And this woman was a nurse practitioner.
Oh my God.
And I was amazed and I guess I shouldn't be. I shouldn't be surprised because we all know that, like, when it comes to your own kids, logic goes out the window. But I was really like, somebody told her that, and that made medical sense to her.
Yeah. I think it's also important to remember, and I remember learning this, and like, I feel like my perspective on everything changed, is like medical, like in the medical community, doctors, like medical doctors, breastfeeding doesn't exist in medical curriculum.
No, it does not.
There's like, it doesn't, it's not there. There's all this stuff about formula. The curriculum was made like in the 30s or whatever, and it hasn't changed since then. Like, seriously, it hasn't changed. And doctors, unless they go and get their own, and learn about it themselves and take initiative, they know no more than you do about breastfeeding. And so then people are like, oh my God, I need to go to my doctor, because we're also so isolated, right? We're so isolated. And so we don't have each other. We don't have like our community elders like we used to have. And so we're going to our doctors and we're like, what do we do? What do I do about this breastfeeding? What do I do about that? And really what comes down to it is this doctor's opinion based on no science and no education, basically just saying, giving all these terrible, information to you, like, well, there's no, breast milk has no nutrients after the first 6 months, or there's, breastfeeding your baby past 1 year old will cause psychological damage. Your child will be too needy if they breastfeed too long, and all these things that people just say because it's their opinion. It's
right.
Based on nothing, because they do not know.
They don't know. And it breaks my heart, because then they come to me and they say, well, my pediatrician, and they trust their pediatrician so much, or their doctor, or their OB, or whoever it is.
Yes. And that's so cultural too, right?
Yes.
The doctor is in charge. The doctor knows everything. Doctor. And
it's so, they just trust them, and they really want to believe what they tell them. And I always try to like soft code it, and like, they know that they can't know everything. They can't know everything. And that's why they're specialists. Like, it's
and they don't know anything about breastfeeding. It's not their fault.
No,
it's not in the curriculum, and that's why lactation consultants and like having access to lactation consultants is so important, because these are the people, and doctors really should be referring, when people have breastfeeding problems. And that actually did happen to me. My very first pediatrician that I ended up stopped going to because of other reasons, but she was like, you need to see a lactation consultant. And it was like, now I realize that that's a really unusual thing for doctors to say, because they don't usually do that. And they really should do that more.
They really should. And they, just like they would refer on if a child has an allergic reaction, they go send you to an allergist. Yeah. You come in with, a breathing issue, they send you to respiratory. That you come in with a broken bone, they send you to, wherever. But
exactly.
This is something that's a specialized thing. And not only is it specialized, it is also very, very emotional and psychological to a postpartum mother. So we can't just treat it as a medical issue all the time, because it's not.
It's not.
And new mothers can be very, very delicate when it comes to this stuff, not just because it's breastfeeding, but because it's their baby. And when it gets dismissed, like, oh, it's all right, just do the best you can, and, just be a good mom. What does that mean?
Yeah, and it's like, it's okay to give up, we have formula. It's okay. If you want to give up, it's okay. And you know what? The bottom line is, it is okay. If you don't want to breastfeed, it's okay.
Right.
But you don't have to stop breastfeeding and give up because you're having problems, because somebody can help you through those problems.
Yeah. Whenever I hear someone say to me, well, there's nothing wrong with giving formula, we say, if that's what you want to do, you're right. But if it was your goal to breastfeed your baby, then you should have every chance in the world to do that.
Right.
And you should get all the help that you need to get. You don't go through pregnancy by yourself.
Right.
Everybody, oh yeah, you're pregnant. Then you're at the doctor's once a week at the end. And then you have this baby and they're like, okay, good luck to you. See you in 6 weeks. and see you at your peds appointments. Well, when you go to the ped,
Right.
the pediatrician really doesn't take care of breastfeeding stuff because they're there for the baby. So they don't care if you have plugged ducts or mastitis because they're not dealing with
Right.
that. The OB, they don't really, once the baby's out, they're like, oh, not really dealing with that either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like, what are the big ones? So like big ones are like, oh, the other big one that I hear is like, how often should I feed my baby? You know, like what's the schedule? What's my baby's feeding schedule? No, there's no schedule. Breastfeed your baby, put your baby to your breast like as much as you can and all the time, whenever they cry, whatever they're doing. Just constantly put your baby to the breast. You know, their breast milk, there's no need to, your breast milk turns to water at 6 months. It's not true.
It turns to water.
It doesn't ever turn to water.
Never. So
no.
The ones that I hear a lot, and I kind of came up with this topic today to talk about. We could probably spend like 3 podcasts on this, but
let's do it.
I had a couple of moms recently, and it really stuck in my head how much what other people were saying to them was affecting what they were doing. And it starts, like you said, it starts in pregnancy, but then the breastfeeding piece of it really too in the hospital, because you see, your labor nurse, your postpartum nurse, your OB comes in, and this person comes in, then your lactation consultant, if they have them in the hospital, comes in, and all these different, and they're all telling you something different. Every single one of them is telling you something different. And by the time the mom comes to see me, they're saying, I don't even know what to do because I was told something different every time I saw somebody. Mm-hmm. And that's frustrating. And I don't even know how to fix that for people, because that needs to come down from like a systemic level of hospitals need to have everybody trained exactly the same way. And we all know that's not happening. But you have nurses that come in and granted they mean well, but they're kind of giving information sometimes that they did when they had their babies. Mm-hmm. And then you've got the lactation consultant coming in and saying one thing, and then you've got the other lactation consultant coming in and saying something different, and then the pediatrician coming in and saying, no, I don't think that's right. And, it's very, very, very confusing to a mother who is brand new and has no idea what she's doing.
Right.
Then she goes home, and this one mom that I saw recently kind of sticks out in my head. She came into my office with her husband and this beautiful little baby. And this baby, I'm not kidding, was feeding beautifully. Like, she's beautiful. She was fine. There's no issues with the feeding. It was all, but my mom said that I shouldn't wake the baby up. Do I need to wake the baby up? I don't know what to do. Should I wake the baby? Because then when the baby does wake to eat, then it seems like it's too long, and then she's fussy. And then what about that? Then do I know when she's done? How do I know when she's done? How many minutes? They told me not to feed this long, or I should not feed this. There was, what everybody was saying to her was sticking in her head so deeply that she couldn't even make a decision on her own for this baby.
Right.
And
and everyone's got an opinion, right?
Oh my gosh.
Like, everyone's got something to say.
Everyone has something to say. And I tried to break it down a little bit, and it helped that her husband was extremely supportive, and he was from a different country where this stuff didn't happen. And he was very open to saying, where I come from, nobody knew, we never heard about things like this, about problems with breastfeeding and stuff. It just happens. Why are we making this so difficult? And I was like, you know what? You're extremely right. It shouldn't be. Like, you know your baby better. And she had it in her head that, her mom and her mom's friend, they were trying to help her, and they raised all these kids. So why shouldn't she be taking their advice? It's really hard to understand that now you have a maternal instinct. I mean, I think that was one of the things that was really hard for me too. And I don't know when you felt like yours kicked in, but mine, they kick in pretty quickly after that baby's born. You know that baby. You know that your baby, you know what they need, but you question it because you're like, how could I possibly know this?
Yeah, and then I feel like when you're questioning it, then so I had Jack, and they told me that like a few hours later he was crying, and they said, well, he's crying because he's hungry, because I was induced, and I probably wasn't like producing I don't know what I was producing, but he was nursing. He was like, he was on my breast, and he seemed to be nursing fine, and he was crying, and then they were like, well, he's crying because he's hungry, and you're not making enough milk. Oh God, that's the other one. You're not making enough milk.
Oh yeah.
And so you need to give him some formula. And I said, no, because I read in a book that I said that, like, I don't even know, like, like, just say no, like, if you want to breastfeed, say no to formula. So I was like, okay, I'm going to say, I said no. And they're like, well, he's hungry. You really need to give him something. And, they all, like, 3 of them said that. And I was like, oh my God, okay, well, I guess they know what they're talking about. So then I gave him formula. And so when I said no, I was confident in that, but then they were very quick to knock that down. So I thought, well, okay, maybe there is something wrong here. And so then there's the doubt, right? That's the beginning of I was pretty doubtful the whole time. I don't know what I'm doing. I knew I didn't know what I was doing. But when I was trying to make like an executive decision about my baby, they were like, no, that's not, he's going to be hungry. He's like starving, I'm like, well, God, I'm not going to starve my baby.
I know. Then you feel like the worst mother in the world.
Well, then I'm like, oh my God, give him some formula. Holy moly. Okay, let's do this. So then he's like, hooked on formula, which was not what I wanted. And so I'm going, how do I fix this? How do I, but then I'm dealing with the whole, like, well, I'm not making enough milk. So I totally believe this, that I'm not making enough milk, and I've got it in my head now. And so there it is. I don't know what I'm doing now. And so now again, I'm Googling, and I'm getting all of the worst information that you can get, because Google is terrible. And I know that Google is great. Like, if you want to know, like, who won the World Series in 1972, like, Google is awesome. But if you need, like, reliable breastfeeding information, it's not a great place to go. So, so then there was just doubt and bad information the whole time coming at me and then we went to the pediatrician, and, they're like, oh, well, it's okay. Everything's fine. Everything's going fine. And I mean, though I did say the one did refer me to a lactation consultant. And I feel like that's really when I got involved, when I got in touch with lactation consultants, then I think things started to go a lot better, because then the people who knew were dealing with the problem. But the whole time, people who, they didn't even know, but they didn't know that they didn't know. It's a business, it's a system, and it's very powerful. Like the whole medical community, like the medical community is like, it's big, it's huge.
It's absolutely
powerful.
Huge and powerful, and contradictory and impossible to go up against almost.
Yeah. And if you do go up against it, they make it very clear that, that you're going up against something that you're not going to win.
Right.
I had a pediatrician one time tell me that I needed to stop asking questions.
Oh.
Yes. She looked at me over her glasses and told me I needed to stop asking questions. And I was asking questions about a really important issue, which we don't have to talk about today. But, she just looked at me and said, you need to stop asking so many questions. I was like, who says that? Somebody.
Somebody who doesn't have the answers, probably.
Right.
Right.
Yes. I mean, she knew I didn't like the answers she was giving me. And when I pressed on, she just told me to stop.
Oh my gosh. It's that, and Google and the books. And when people tell me, oh, I'm reading this book, I'm reading that book, and I want people to be informed. It doesn't have anything to do with that. But to think, okay, in the book, it says that my baby should be feeding every 3 hours, that they should be sleeping 5 to 6 hours a night by the time they're 4 weeks of age, that they shouldn't need to eat overnight. That's another good one. They shouldn't need to eat overnight past, 2 or 3 months. The books are saying this, therefore that's the way I must go. It must be true. And I always try to put it into perspective with these families that your baby is not a cookie cutter. These babies are not the same. Every baby is not the same, and every baby is going to do something different. If you have 8 babies, they're going to do 8 different things. They're going to have 8 different personalities. They're going to have 8 different sleeping patterns and eating patterns, and that's just the way it is. But the books don't tell you that. And if the books told you that, then we would have no more books, because there's nothing to write about that. It's just the way it is,
So I think that, so now, we talk so much about misinformation, how much misinformation is out there. So what do we actually do about that? And, I think that getting in touch with a lactation consultant, even before, when people say, people always say like, I'm having a baby and what should I do to prepare? You know, I'd say like, try to find a lactation consultant that you like.
Mm-hmm.
You know, somebody who could be there for you from the beginning, because honestly, odds are in this country, just the way that things kind of go, is that people do at least have questions or concerns, you know, and the lactation consultant is happy to talk to you, to answer your questions, to like, you know, to help you if you have obviously problems, big problems, small problems, whatever. And I think that that's something that people actually can do. Because that takes plan. You know, you have to actually, you know, call the La Leche League or attend a meeting, or actually like that's something that you can do. Like when you're like freaking out about having a baby and you're in your whole nesting phase and you've painted every room of the house and you've already bought all the stuff and now it's like, oh my God, now what else do I do? Call the La Leche League and say, I'm just looking for somebody who can, you know, be my contact.
Especially in this day and age where everybody's isolated and separated. Yeah. And sometimes you have, you know, people having children who don't even have family around them or don't have friends that have had kids or are having babies later on in life and their friends' kids are grown. To reach out is huge and important. Even if you think it's not a major thing, you know, it could be something that you feel like is, I feel like this is a silly question, but it might not be. It might be it probably is completely valid and attached to other questions that you might have down the line. I've gotten phone calls from people when their baby is 9-10 months old and that's the first time they've ever needed to call somebody because the baby's teething or the baby's doing solids or, you know, like whatever. But there's always questions. Things evolve and you always have questions, and there's nothing wrong with reaching out to a lactation consultant who can help you with that stuff. It's so much easier than trying to figure it out. You waste more time probably Googling it than you would just calling somebody.
Or like, or going on Facebook and asking all your Facebook friends. Although I would say that Facebook is a good place maybe to connect with some other breastfeeding moms in your neighborhood or in your city or whatever, because sometimes a big help as well is cutting through the noise and cutting through all of that bad information is just meeting somebody who's also breastfeeding and like sitting with her, you know, just like two breastfeeding moms sitting there and like you're seeing her doing it and you're like, oh yeah, that's what I look like in the mirror. Or like, you know, like there's something about just like seeing it and having like somebody else who breastfeeds. Cause I mean, when I first breastfed, I'd never seen anybody breastfeed. I didn't even know anyone who had kids. So when I was like to go around, you know, I didn't even know how to find people, but I started doing like, you know, what are those? There's so many more resources now, and I think Facebook is a really good. But you know, meetup.com or something. Yeah. So I found some moms in my neighborhood, and it really made a huge difference just to be around other people who were breastfeeding.
One of the ways that I've seen Facebook really play a huge role with this. I am on some Facebook breastfeeding groups here locally in our area, and sometimes I'll see moms pop up and be like, you know, my mother-in-law told me that I shouldn't still be breastfeeding. Has anybody else heard that? What do you guys think? I don't want to, you know, like, and then you get these moms that pipe up and are like, hey, you know, you're doing fantastic. Just the support that can come out of these groups to make you feel like, all right, I can get through one more day. Or, oh, it's so painful. I don't know what to do. I'm so tired. You know, can somebody give me some advice here? And people say, you're doing a great job. This passes. I went through it. You know, it's just to hear those kinds of things. It's irreplaceable.
Yeah, totally. And things like that you don't see like in normal society, because again, you can walk around all day and never see a person breastfeeding. Right. Never see a person breastfeeding somebody over the age of 2, you know, and suddenly you get online and you join like some sort of like extended breastfeeding or, you know, breastfeeding beyond infancy breastfeeding group. And then there's like thousands of moms in there doing the same thing that you're doing. And you're right, like the support that comes out of that and just the like, oh, yeah, people can do this. Yeah. Oh, wait, I can do this.
It's not as strange.
Oh, that works. Yeah. It's not that strange. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I know. So as far as how we're going to change the world today, we are going to encourage moms to get more support, to find those people that are going to be their cheerleaders, and to not listen to things that just don't sound right.
Yeah, and to ask questions, to find a lactation consultant, because I know a lot of people, this is the other thing is, Google's free, which is another thing that people really like about it. But professionals have actually gone to school and like paid, like paying off loans and like have jobs and stuff, like sometimes like actually, maybe buy like a cheaper stroller, a cheaper crib. And, people are so ready to spend money on your baby, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, I want this cool crib. I want this cool stroller. I want to have that. I want to have all this cool stuff. But, and then it's like, well, here you need some reliable breastfeeding information. It's like, well, I'm not going to pay that, $3 for that app or that $10 for that book from that, that great lactation consultant. Right. Well, it actually might be worth it, or paying, for a lactation consultant to come, make a visit to your house or whatever it is. That stuff is actually might be a good investment.
It's such a good investment. And I mean, because it's not covered by insurances in a lot of places still, I mean, spotty, yeah. I can get it covered spotty sometimes in, here in New York, but people think, well, maybe it's not an important enough thing. It's not covered by insurance. Yeah. It's not recognized. It is important. And quite honestly, formula is more expensive than
it is. And one
a lactation consultant visit. And there have been times where my husband, like people have called me and then they find out that there's a fee involved or that they have to pay out of pocket. And they're like, oh, well, maybe, I'll call you back if I still need help. And there was one time my husband looked at me and he said, people will pay more for an iPhone at this point. And I'm like, you're right. Yeah. They will.
Well, and I think it's partly Google's fault. I'm going to blame Google because I think people are like, well, why would I pay for that when I can get it free on Google? I can just Google it. And there's like 50 blog posts by who knows who,
yeah.
About like what to do. But because it's like, well, then I don't need to pay for it because it's free right here. But people don't realize that information is terrible.
It's terrible.
And the people that have the reliable information are the people who have gone through education and all, and all of these things where it's going to cost a little bit of money. Just like going to the doctor costs money.
It does.
Because they have all of the medical information. And so the person who has the reliable breastfeeding information might come with a fee. And, you can still, La Leche League is free. That's a good place to start. There's
all sorts of stuff. Usually if you can have, time with a lactation consultant, they can help you with what's going on specific to your situation. You can, of course, you can Google and read and, look at the blogs all day long about, we'll use the example of going back to work because that happens quite often. Going back to work at 6 weeks with a baby is very different than going back to work at 3 months with a baby. Your pumping is going to be different than, my pumping because we have different routines, different schedules, different times that we work. You can't, if you can talk to somebody one-on-one, you're going to get very individualized, specialized information that's good for you and your baby, not just what you read in a book and not just what you read in a blog or on Google. And that is something that's going to take you a lot further. But,
right. And I think as well as somebody being able to see you and your baby.
That's a good point.
Actually somebody being able to look at your baby breastfeeding and say, okay, I can see, let's make a little adjustments here. Or, actually you're right. Like what's specifically going on with you? Like, what are you experiencing?
Yeah.
Because that is the problem with like, just the cookie cutter, like, the blogs and the books and even asking on Facebook, because then people are like, well, I have this experience. And then, I'll tell you about my experience about this, when I had like overactive letdown or something for an example. Mm-hmm. And then, well, it doesn't, that might not, you might do everything that she just told you to do, but your body and your baby are completely different. And you might have a whole like other situation going on that you don't even know about because you haven't seen a professional.
Right. Exactly. See,
and that person hasn't seen you. Yeah. And people like email me questions and stuff. And first of all, I'm not a lactation consultant. And second of all, I have no idea like what else is going on. Like maybe your baby has like a tongue tie or I don't know, like nobody can know unless they actually see what's happening.
Yes. There's a lot to it. And I think again, you've got this whole idea behind society that says breastfeeding should be natural and easy and simple. And it's not. There's a lot more things that go on with it. It's not as natural and easy and simple as people think it is. But they get this, this thought where we prepare for the birth. The birth is hard. The birth is, going to be terrible. We need to take classes for birth. We need to make sure we see our doctor regularly. We need to make sure we know everything that's going on. But nobody prepares for the breastfeeding piece. And
yeah, right.
That will last a lot longer than the birth will. So,
yeah.
So conflicting info. So we'll wrap up. If anybody out there in podcast world has questions about anything that comes up as far as conflicting information, you hear this, you hear that, we would love to hear about it. We would love to hear about it, and we could talk about it on the podcast, do all sorts of things with it, get all kinds of other information from other people and see what everybody thinks. But we would love to hear if you have concerns about conflicting information. And Abby's going to share the email address.
Yes, and you can email us at thebadassbreastfeeder@gmail.com.
And I think we're good. So we will have another fantastic topic for you for next week. And we're gonna keep it a surprise. Absolutely. Keep it a surprise. But we hope to hear from you in between. And
unless we hear from all kinds of people who have all this conflicting information, then maybe we need to talk about that.
Yes, because we truly could go on for a long time.
That's the basis. Conflicting information is like the basis of all breastfeeding in America.
It's the core. It's the core of everything that goes on. Okay, I'm Dianne Cassidy, lactation consultant, and you can reach me at DianneCassidyConsulting.com, which is my website.
And I'm Abby Thiering, and you can reach us with your questions at thebadassbreastfeeder@gmail.com.
Until next time.